we do ask our Board of Conservation and Recreation to support the designation. And so we do that, but outside of that, that's the only involvement that we have in the process once the evaluation and report are completed. And I think that's it, unless there are any questions.
Lynn, I'm going to throw it open to questions, but I want to start with one myself. What can you list the 14 criteria for us?
Sure. One is buffers. We want them over 100 feet if possible. The second one is whether or not there's any impediment, a dam, a channelization, something like that. The third one is development, both urban, industrial, and rural development. Historic resources, whether or not they're visible and designated as state or nationally important. Then we look at natural heritage features. So if there are any rare and endangered species, that is looked at. We also look at landscape qualities. So whether or not there's a lot of variety, whether or not there's distant views, whether or not those things are a part of it. We look at the quality of the fisheries, quantity, variety. We look at water quality, but not benthic or chemical quality, but turbidity and trash. We look at impacts of parallel roads, crossings, bridge, pipelines, transmission lines, special features, we list them, an overall appeal score, public recreational access, and permanent protection.
Okay, thank you. Jason has a question.
Yes, I would just like to say thank you again for the work you all are doing on this behalf. There's no doubt in my mind that the Lower Rappahannock meets all those criteria and will meet those criteria when the time comes. Where are we in getting all the localities letter of intent at this point?
To be honest with you, I haven't put together a list, a full list to think about that. I've got numerous ones. I could read them off if you want.
Lynn, I can save the time. Mr. Chairman, we've received confirmation from Board of Supervisors or county administrators from all localities except for Middlesex, which I understand is slated to be on their Board of Supervisor agenda early next week.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Other questions for Lynn or for Brian for that matter?
Lynn, this is Brian. I had a question. My understanding is that this may be the first tidally influenced river section designated under the state scenic program. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
We have the lower Blackwater has some title. We have the north, shoot, what's it called? Hold on. North Landing, Paddock-Way,
Okay.
and Blackwater that are title.
Okay.
And then the lower historic James is a small section that is also title. But
I was curious, these tidal working waterfront river sections have some unique features that all of our localities in this area consider to be historic, culturally significant, and scenic, that compared to a different stretch of river that's not a working waterfront might be seen differently. For instance, our wooden dead rises, our wharfs and things of that nature, which if looked at in an upper river section might be development along the riverbank, whereas they're part of our cultural history And even if you look at the Middle Peninsula Planning District's logo, they incorporate the iconic dead rise in there. And just when we see working watermen out on the river, we see that as a positive, not as a mar on the landscape, and just didn't know how that might be taken into account with your assessment.
Well, the assessment is done compared to rivers of like type. So you're not comparing it to a Piedmont or mountain river or stream, first of all. Second of all, I agree with you. I think that's part of the culture. It's part of the understanding. It's part of what makes the river unique. The York River, which was evaluated a number of years ago, was found qualified, which is kind of the same, you know, it's a working landscape for that perspective. They just chose not to move forward because of really misunderstanding the program, but it's still qualified. So that would not have any major impact. Now, I would say, you know, if it was all junkyards and ugliness, that would be a different conversation, but I'm sure it's a mix if at worst, and probably not that.
And another, oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, I was just going to say, Brian, on that having extensive research in that field when we took on Dominion and the No Towers, any of the major type of industrial or working waterfront that would have been mar the actual riverbanks of the Rappahannock, most of that is up on the creeks or in the tributaries and not directly exposed out on the river from basically Fredericksburg down. And we were basically also had to prove that most of the localities all along this whole area, including Fredericksburg, have a large area of protection along the riverbanks. And then every single comprehensive plan of these localities all talk about protecting the river and the importance and the value of the river. And pretty much every effort that we've undertaken since Senior Warner stood on the Embry Dam and blasted it and opened the river up has been an endeavor to open up the Rappahannock to cultural and working waterfront, as well as the scenic value of that and attracting that tourism value.
Pat.
Yes, I was curious though, and I should know the answer, but does scenic river designation show up in county comprehensive plans and in databases like Conserve Virginia?
So I can't answer for local comprehensive plans. In some cases it does, in some cases it's more general. As far as the Conserve Virginia database, there is a scenic layer and scenic rivers are included on that layer, designated ones not qualified or potential. However, the protection that's provided by Conserve Virginia is only 200 feet on either side of the river.
And to follow up on Pat's question, when you have a scenic river designated, can you speak to whether it increases competitiveness or eligibility for any sort of prioritized DCR or other state grants related to conservation?
It does. That's a short answer, it does.
So for our planning district folks or locality folks, do you mind if you have an example of those types of grants that might trickle down and benefit their localities because of this designation?
So the VCLF is the first one that comes to mind. The VOF, Land and Water looks at it. There are a number of grant programs that do.
Okay, and let me clarify a little bit. When you say land and water, you're talking Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is outdoor recreation grants, outdoor recreation land and facilities.
Yeah, it's not necessarily recreation, it's open space too, but yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it's land conservation. So, right.
Does that include recreational trails, RTP funds as well?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
So it not only increases your competitiveness for land acquisition and land conservation, but also for grants that help you develop outdoor spaces that are already acquired and put infrastructure on them, like trails, interpretive signage, those types of things.
Picnic
correct?
shelters.
Yep.
And to be honest, Lynn, I'm gonna step on you a little bit here. The Virginia Outdoors Fund, which is the Virginia name for the land and water conservation, can be used for active outdoor recreation facilities as well. Ball fields, tennis courts, swimming pools.
No, the VOF cannot, but the LWCF can. So the VOF, which is the Virginia Outdoors Fund, is only used for land conservation acquisition.
Yeah, I'll stand corrected, Lynn. That shows how far behind the times I am. In the 80s, the VOF was the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and it was the same thing. So the name the meaning of the name has changed over the years.
Although it's probably worth mentioning that the Secretary of Natural Resources has been pushing pretty hard to have both VOF's guidelines as well as the VOF, Virginia Outdoors Fund guidelines, extended now to include recreational opportunities. So there may end up, in other words, the answer to that is no now, but maybe yes in the near future.
Right.
I will say one of the arguments we heard specifically in Caroline County against scenic status was the fact that counties are losing lots of land to preservation, wildlife refuges, whatever it might be. The concern was the more, especially in Caroline County with AP Hill, is that they have lost a lot of land for tax base. So the fact that Conserve Virginia, or that it would make it easier for people to qualify to put more land in potential preservation tends to, in my mind, we need to figure out how to answer that, because he might have a somewhat valid point with that then, if we're talking about that, if that's what it makes it.
So it's only one of the criteria, so it doesn't raise to the top of the criteria, for one thing. The other thing that I would use as a discussion with that are the two recent studies that were done on the Eastern Shore and the Lower Chickahominy, where they actually looked at the economic value of land and conserved land relative to costs for communities. And in both of those studies, what they found is for every dollar spent on land conservation, they actually saved, it was actually cheaper than having to provide services. So, library, police, schools, fire, etc., sewer, electricity, whatever. So if you're interested, I can get those study links to Eldon and forward them to you, because I think that would be helpful.
Yes, please. I just have one other comment. We were talking about working waterfronts. After having a couple conversations with folks who work the water down actually in Lancaster County, Middlesex County, one of their concerns was the fact that right now there are plenty of conflicts going on between aquaculture and folks who have riparian rights along the banks with docks and what they consider to be scenic. And one of their concerns was that if scenic designation was to be had, that folks would try and use the scenic designation status to get trying to claim that the aquaculture is, quote, not scenic, and use that as a tool.
Right.
I'm just bringing it up. I have a feeling we all might have our own opinions, but this is something that they've.
So I can tell you from how the program works, what our impact would be, shall I put it that way? So we don't have any regulations on those things. So what would happen is if somebody did want to try and use it, they could go before our Board of Conservation and Recreation. They have a scenic subcommittee that they could present their arguments for. That committee would then prepare recommendations about how to make it happen. I mean, the whole thing about scenic is not to keep economic development from happening or even development from happening, but to do it in a way that doesn't deplete the scenic assets of the river, the country, whatever, I mean, the counties or whatever. And so they would give recommendations. And in the case of those kinds of things, I can see them saying, well, you need to sink everything down and you need to make it attractive, nice, you know, nice flags on the corners or something so that boaters are safe. But I mean, not knowing how all that works, I couldn't really say, but they would all, that's all they would do. So if the people who don't want it happening in the river in front of their house are keep pushing it, the only way they're going to really get any action is at the local level. And I would guess that the local boards of supervisors and planning people would support the aquaculture because that is their culture and it is their community.
And this said, these conflicts are going on right now either way. It's just a matter of citing, and these kind of conflicts will go on forever. It was just the concern that they would have another tool to use. The riparian owners would have another tool to use.
Well, they could try and use it, but however, how effective it is going to be based on the people making the decision.
Right. And I will say the folks who work in the water that I've talked to are very much so for this, with the understanding that the conversation we had earlier, the cultural of the dead rises and all these other things, we, you know, most of us view this as part of the scenic part of the river.
And Lynn, just to clarify, when if the lower Rappahannock River gets designated, the creeks that feed it are not going to be automatically incorporated, whether it's the mighty Cortoman River or a small little Carter's Creek or Urbana Creek. Those will remain separate, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions for Lynn? So Lynn, do you get to spend, you know, a week or so floating and fishing the river as part of your assessment?
It depends on, I don't fish, so I don't do that part, and floating usually is not floating. It's usually paddling to get through this in a day. Yeah, so most years I might spend a day or two on the river. The last couple of years, because of the interest in the program being raised because of the 50th, I've been spending a lot more. But it's usually actually hard work because I'm trying to photograph and remember things and write things down on a paper that doesn't get wet, and it gets to be really a long day. I just spent 5 days on the Middle James, and it was, you know, 8 to 10 hour days. And, but we did 45 miles and it looks like it's going to qualify. So that's exciting.
Very good. Lynn, one of the recent designations was the Clinch River.
Yes.
And of course, very different kind of environment than we're talking about here. But if I'm correct, weren't there some issues between some local governments supported it, some did not? Is that correct?
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about the history on the Clinch. There have been sections of the Clinch that had been designated since the earliest one looks like it was in 1992, so for quite a while. And those early sections were in Russell and Russell County, mostly all Russell County. And so because there has been a Clinch River Valley Initiative, which is an initiative to focus on recreation in the Clinch River Valley, which goes from Tazewell down to Scott County and to the Tennessee line, they've been doing a lot of local small town redevelopment. They've been adding water accesses. They've been dealing with water quality, environmental education, and developing of a state park. So I had been asked several years ago in Tazewell County to do a review of that county, the section in that county. It was found to be qualified. The county then, the legislators then backed it out because they were interested in some kind of big Dominion power plant going in. A couple of years passed and they decided that that wasn't the right site anyway. And so they wanted to move forward. Russell County had asked for evaluations a little bit after that, and one section was found to qualify and one section was found not to qualify. And but they decided not to move forward with that. But then this year, the Tazewell County went forward, and a legislator said, okay, we want the rest of it all the way to the Tennessee line to be designated. Without Scott County, which is the lowest to Tennessee, chiming in at all. And Scott County absolutely refused. They didn't want it. And so what ended up happening, much to my chagrin, is all of the section in Russell and Tazewell, and part of the section in Tazewell, not even all of it, that qualified, went forward. So the section that was trashy went forward, and sections that should have gone forward didn't go forward. So that's what happened with the clinch. And I was really uncomfortable with it because I felt like it set a precedence for the General Assembly to make decisions about a scenic river that hadn't actually gone through and met the qualified criteria. Scott County, I did a presentation and then to their Board of Supervisors, and they were afraid that the designation would cost them more money in their development, so they didn't want to do it.
Okay,
And these are poor counties, you know, like some of your alls, that have real challenges.
And the point of all that, Lynn, is that yes, it is a state designation, but designations don't proceed in geographic areas where the jurisdiction is unwilling or uncomfortable to go forward.
Right.
And that's an important point. And that's been the nature of the program from the beginning.
Correct.
Okay, full disclosure for those of you who didn't already get it, I worked for the Commission of Outdoor Recreation from 1979 to 1984. And although that wasn't the beginning of the program, it was not long after the beginning of the program. I did not work in the program, but I knew John Herwald, who was the Scenic Rivers guy, and John Davey, who was head of planning. And I used to tease John that he had the best job in the state because he got paid, and he really did float them and fished them.
Yeah.
And he won some of those early designations. They would take off for a week and start down the river and camp along the way. And like I said, he got paid to camp and fish. So anyway, Lynn,
and he had his buddies go with him, and now it's only me.
Yeah, that's right. There were usually 2 or 3 of them involved in each float.
Yeah.
And the commission owned the canoe, and back in those days, employees could borrow the canoe for the weekend. Until one of my colleagues wrapped it around a boulder, and the executive director, Rob Blackmore, put a stop to that. He shut us down. We were all kids. We were having a great time. Anyway, Lynn, thank you for that. That's very, very thorough. I sense that you, Brent, you mentioned Caroline, but I think, Brian, didn't they go ahead and
the vote was 4-1.
Pardon?
The vote was 4-1. They did pass it.
As did the town of Port Royal.
As did the town of Port Royal. I just had one clarifying question. One more is, so we have one county on one side, the other county on the other. If one county actually decides not to ask to go forward with it after the study, I just want to clarify that makes it so that whole stretch of river where those 2 counties are cannot be designated as scenic.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So if in this case it was Middlesex, then it would stop at the western boundary of Middlesex if everybody else upstream went forward, based on what's happened in the past.
Correct. Yes.
And, hey, they didn't do the upper Rappahannock all at once, and it's just.
Well, I do wonder if if Middlesex is having another meeting, if there's any way that someone from the upper section who's had it for a long time could go and sort of say, there's not a big impact. I know in the case of when the Rappahannock was working on them, Culpeper came up and said, well, we've had it for 25 years and we don't have a problem with it. So anyway, I put that out there as a possibility. I don't know if it can even work politically, but it's out there.
Is there any outreach? Maybe Chairman Bellows can speak on this. Is there any outreach? And I don't know, maybe this is not even something that is frowned upon, but outreach from other board of supervisors to other counties saying, we like this benefits everybody?
I will say I'm calling my colleagues on the Middlesex board that I'm friends with and doing that outreach. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And Lynn will be getting a letter that the chairman signed yesterday, later today. The commission voted unanimously to endorse going forward with the study, because the study has to happen before there's even a discussion of designation. And so that's really all this is at this point, where is the study process taking it to the General Assembly. Lynn, you'll get that later today in an email from me.
Okay, great.
And then at some point, John McCarthy can play carpetbagger, and he can go down and lobby the Middlesex board from up in the western part of the basin.
I was reminded of when you asked whether other boards of supervisors talked to their colleagues about this. Roy Blunt tells a story about when he was asked whether he believed in infant baptism, and he said, "Believe it, I've seen it done." So I will say the same response about boards of supervisors members lobbying their peers, because it is in the furtherance of something that tourism is benefiting just about all these communities that participate. So, I mean, it does help to have a continuous stretch. I mean, that if you got to put in and a takeout in a designated scenic river, that really helps, as Brian and everybody on this call can attest to.
And just as another accolade or story about that is on the Upper James, there's a very prominent outfitter who has been providing access to 50 some miles of the Upper James River. And they had one section that was designated of about, 10 to 15 miles. And everybody wanted to go on that section, and they were having trouble managing where they put people in, because people wanted to go on the designated section, and either it had rapids that the beginners couldn't do, but that's where they wanted to go. So they were very instrumental in getting that designation extended, and it did extend. So it now goes from the confluence of the Jackson and the cow pasture all the way down halfway through Balcony Falls. It didn't go all the way through because Bedford refused to support it. But anyway, but the point is now that all of it is designated, they can manage their clients and their users in a much better fashion, because then they can meet the recommended trips based on the skill and qualification and length of time and those sorts of things. So there's an example of the economic value. And those people the other thing that they've done is they have set up a 5-day paddling trip for Boy Scouts. So Boy Scouts from all over the Mid-Atlantic, I think they had 120 troops the other year, come in and do their 5-day trip, 50 miles. And one of the days they spend pulling tires out of the river. Yeah. And the outfitter gives them pizza. And so it's really well managed, I think. And they do a lot of things, for the river. And every time they go out, they do a GPS when they find another pile of tires. So.
Very good. Any other questions for Lynn? Lynn, thank you. This is great. I'm sure we'll be talking more about this as we go forward. Mr. Chairman will be working to, once we start talking about the resolution that will have to be put before the General Assembly, our legislative members, and getting everybody on board as best we can.
Sounds great. Well, I'm here if you have further questions, and I will send you that economic study, and we will. Oh, I did have one further question. Did all of you get the invitation to the Rappahannock Film Night?
No.
Well,
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. I did at least. Yeah.
so Brian, maybe you could send it to everybody here so that they can distribute it as well, because it is going to have a section about the Lower Rappahannock as part of that evening. And then it's showing the wonderful film that FOR put together on the Rappahannock.
Yeah, Lynn, this is John Bateman. We're getting ready to put a blog post on our virginiawatertrails.org website about that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, it'll go out in a Rappahannock Roundtable partner update this week, and then I'll also send a link to Eldon so you can distribute it.
Okay, great.
Great.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, very much, and look forward to working with you on this project.
Thanks again, Lynn.
Thanks, Lynn.
Bye-bye.
Dave, are you ready to take over?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'm going to see if I can be successful in sharing my screen while you start talking.
Okay, sounds good. So, well, I don't know if Lynn's still on. She said goodbye, but boy,
she
was
dropped
that,
off.
Yeah, what a great presentation. And for folks that, like me, we're happy to learn more about the Scenic River program. The links that she shared with some story maps about the program, and I looked especially at Catoctin Creek, because that's within my Northern Regional Office of DEQ. Really, really interesting. So I'm glad we had so much time to talk about that. And one of the things she said is when the Scenic River program considers water quality, they're really thinking about, visual quality. How good does it look? Does it look relatively clear? That sort of thing. What I'm going to be talking about is water quality in terms of chemical or biological health. Yeah, thanks, Eldon. The slide's up on the screen. You can go to the next one. You can really probably go beyond that. Yeah, go on to the next one. Okay, so the DEQ and the state has got a lot of experience with bacteria impairments of the recreational use of water, and where there are high bacteria levels, accidentally ingesting water with those high levels can produce sickness. And if you have cuts or scrapes, open sores or something like that, you get some pretty bad infections. I think most people are pretty familiar with that. You'll see on this map, so the orange section, if your color is the same as mine, are 3 adjoining watersheds that are going to be addressed in a single TMDL implementation plan. At the top of the map is the lowermost section of the Upper Hazel River. That was a part of the Upper Rappahannock TMDL that was done in 2008. The middle part of the orange section, in relatively small print, you see Muddy Run, RA15. That is Muddy Run, which drains, empties into the Rappahannock. That had its own bacteria TMDL done in 2004. And then the lowermost section is 3 Huck 6 watersheds all along Mountain Run, with the town of Culpeper there and the lower central part of the map in that watershed. And Mountain Run was one of the very first TMDLs that was done in the state in 2001. So as I said, the implementation plan will cover these combined areas while they were in separate TMDLs. Each of those TMDLs pertain to the recreational use impairment and bacteria. They're also relative, though they adjoin, of course, but they're also relatively similar land uses, with the exception of, much higher level of development in and around the town of Culpeper. It is about 100,000 acres. So, and I'll just point out, both within the orange area and then outside it in some adjoining watersheds, the red designated streams are the ones that are currently in the 2018 integrated report are designated as impaired for bacteria. Before moving on, though, I want to just acknowledge that there are other impairments. Recently, in both 2018 and the draft 2020 integrated assessment, new benthic or biological community impairments have been registered within Mountain Run. And so because many of the measures that are used, both agricultural and stormwater type measures to reduce bacteria, also will have the benefit of reducing either nutrients or sediments, which are the main drivers for the benthic impairments. We see an opportunity here with this implementation plan to avoid the need for a new TMDL for those benthic impairments. That will be kind of a negotiation with EPA once we have completed the plan, whether they will accept it as an alternative to a TMDL or whether they will conclude that a TMDL is needed. They likely won't. What they'll probably say is, well, you need to still show it as on the impaired list, but we'll give you time. We won't put any pressure on the state to do a TMDL for the benthic impairments. We'll give you time to show the effects of implementing the implementation plan we have. So while this implementation plan is focused on following up on the bacteria TMDLs, it's also an opportunity to more efficiently address the benthic impairments in Mountain Run. One other thing I'll say, though, on Mountain Run, there also are PCB impairments, and that will be subject to a separate TMDL process, perhaps a year or more out. But anyway, DEQ does plan to do separate TMDLs for PCB, and that'll be a different process. So you can click on. Normally, and by that, I mean for essentially the 100 past TMDL implementation plans that have been done, DEQ contracts with, well, in DCR before. This program was with DCR until about 5 years ago. But in any case, the normal process has been to engage a technical contractor, and that can be a little bit expensive. Can be in the $30,000 to $70,000 range, so maybe averages about $50,000 to have a technical contractor do new modeling and take the lead for developing the technical report. But here we see an opportunity in light of all the bacteria TMDLs and implementation plans that have been created in similar settings nearby and with similar land uses, to take a different approach to basically profile what those watersheds look like, what their land uses are, and what best management practices were identified as a result of a water quality modeling type approach. And rather than do new modeling and spend the cost that takes, to instead do kind of a comparative analysis, look for similarities and differences in land uses and the bacteria sources, take a look at how the TMDLs differed in terms of the amount of bacteria that were identified as needing to be reduced, and basically take more of a rougher approach, a more approximate approach to identifying an initial set of BMPs that then can be discussed with stakeholders that know the local area and have a sense of what type practices are going to be most interesting, most of interest, most supported by the local community. Along those lines, I've just analyzed the BMPs that have already been put in place in these watersheds, and it's a good bit of work over the last 20 years, almost $4 million worth of BMPs. So a lot of work has been done, but I've also looked at water quality trends, and the water quality is basically holding its own. When it comes to bacteria levels. They bounce around a lot. They're very influenced by the timing of sampling relative to heavy precipitation. But when you look over that long period of time, there so far are not clear trends downward, which is why those waters remain impaired. So while a lot has been done, I think there's a need to do more, both more and probably pinpoint the areas where additional agricultural BMPs, where some new stormwater measures, some additional septic work will pay the biggest dividends in terms of water quality. And, you know, what we like to do is broadcast these planning processes well and really bring as many people who have interest and some local knowledge into the equation. So click on, if you would, Eldon. This is just a quick look at the timeline. So the big block at the top is basically what I've been doing, and work to reach out and get additional data from local sources, from VDH when it comes to septic, to do some GIS type analysis and prepare that comparative analysis, profile the relevant nearby implementation plan watersheds that have already been done. Looking at, and I'll have this written later so you can check it out on the slide. Thank you, Eldon, for sharing the presentation, because then people that are interested will have the information right in front of them in terms of an October 28th evening public meeting. It'll be a virtual meeting, 6:30 to 8 p.m. And that's written down on a subsequent slide. And then the next morning from 10 till noon will be the first of 2 or 3 more detailed discussions within the work group, the folks that say, yeah, I'd like to put a little additional time into it. I want to be more than just aware of this. I want to contribute toward the plan's development. They can participate in work group discussions. So the opening public meeting, the evening of Wednesday, October 28th, and then the initial work group meeting, to be followed by a couple more to be determined, will be the next morning, October 29th, both virtual. I don't think there's more to say here, except what I want to do is move quick enough so that this area may be eligible to apply for a new Section 319 grant, the next round of grants. The RFA, request for applications, is generally issued by DEQ in the end of June, the beginning of July. And this year we asked for applications August 30th. Despite my best efforts, and if I can hold to an ambitious schedule, we won't have an approved plan at that point. But what we would need is an approved plan to a plan that EPA has approved by the time that DEQ would propose to award a grant. And that would be more like January of 2022. So we have a decent chance, I think, to hit that. But in any case, the goal would be to move quickly through the process, drawing upon the experience of other approved EPAs, and make this area eligible for some Section 319 Clean Water Act non-point source grants that up until now it hasn't been eligible for. So a lot of good work has been done with state programs, but it really hasn't been eligible for the additional resources that the Clean Water Act Section 319 program can bring. Okay, move on. This is just a chance to show you what some aerial imagery looks like for the area. And what it would show you is, for these 3 consolidated watersheds, 50% of it remains in forest. That's both the dark green and the middle tone green. It's kind of hard to distinguish one shade of green that indicates pasture, the lightest of the green shades from the next darker one. So I'll probably see if we can fine tune the color scheme a little bit, but it is about 50% forested. About 25% is pasture. Another 10, 11% is cropland. And then for the area as a whole, for the three watersheds as a whole, between 13, almost 14% is developed. As those of you that know the area, and probably many of you know it far better than I do, the developed land is most concentrated in and around the town of Culpeper. And there, I think it's more like 25 to 30% developed land, but then the outlying areas are much more rural in character. One important part of the data is, well, how many livestock are there? In terms of achieving bacteria reductions, the biggest bang is to make sure that livestock don't have access to streams. There's a lot of exclusion fencing that's already been put in here, but what we're doing is taking a closer look at the aerial analysis and identifying where it appears that there's cattle access to streams and no sign of existing fencing. So as I said, there's a lot of good conservation work that's been done, and there's a need for more, but probably more than anything is really the need to pinpoint what are the areas where there seems to be the greatest ongoing releases of bacteria. And of course, this is a voluntary program, exclusion fencing, but targeted outreach can really make a difference, especially coupled with the state's very generous financial support now and cost share with the 50-foot buffer. It's now eligible for 100% cost share, as well as a payment for the land loss to the buffer. So anyway, good opportunities, I think, to take water quality improvements to the next level here. Next slide. As I said, I've been reaching out to VDH early on in my analysis. It's been a while. I need to take a closer look at it. Their data is not complete on septic systems, but it's in good shape, certainly, for septic installations and repairs that require a permit. And you can see there's been a good bit of permitted septic work, 134, and that's probably very incomplete in the previous decade, 2000 and 2009, but then stepped up significantly and more than that in each of the next 5-year periods. So, that's been stimulated in part by a grant that the Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District has had under the Water Quality Improvement Fund, the state's own water quality funds. But that grant has reached its conclusion, and DQ has not gotten WQIF funds to continue that. So this provides an opportunity, this implementation plan, to include septic repairs and installations that would provide for additional and future cost share assistance to both repair and replace. And we even provide assistance, many of you know, for pump outs. And that's kind of a best way to get somebody that has a system that's not working well to understand what really needs to be done. So the pump out itself doesn't provide much of an environmental improvement, but if it identifies a system that needs to be repaired or replaced, and because there's cost share available to do it, a homeowner will take that step. It really does provide the opportunity to really improve water quality. Also, again, people that know the area know that Culpeper has a wastewater treatment plant. There are a few smaller package plants that are in the area. So there's also potentially some opportunities to hook up additional homes to sewer. Next slide.
Hang on. There we go.
And I would continue, except I forgot what the next slide was going to say. I don't need to spend much time with this, but of course we do need to look at how populations and the number of households has changed since when the TMDLs were done. And Culpeper County and the town are growing at a significant rate. We'll do some additional GIS analysis and make sure that we have the most current population estimates. A couple of things that that especially relates to is understanding how developed land has changed, and does it identify a need for perhaps more stormwater management than might have been identified. And if it does, one good thing is, at least at this point, Culpeper is not a MS4 community. For those that are, it complicates the ability to provide Section 319 assistance for stormwater management measures like rain gardens or, vegetated swales, bioretention, and so on, because those are probably the measures that are going to be included in their municipal separate storm sewer system or sanitary sewer system permit. And if it's a requirement of a permit, then 319 grant assistance can't be provided. But at least at this point in time, that doesn't tie to Culpeper, and so we can both include some of these measures, rain gardens, bioretention, and so on, and they could be eligible for grant assistance. Also, pet waste, while in total is not going to be a significant contributor of bacteria, there are studies that have shown that in particular areas, it's the primary driver, and unless you address it, you're not going to achieve water quality goals. So understanding the location of people is essential to understanding the location of pets and knowing whether we need to deal with that. Next slide.
David? Do these estimated population increases in Culpeper cross any threshold that could push them into consideration for an MS4 permit?
Well, they're getting close, but it's really a pretty complicated calculus, and so I casually inquired about that within DQ, and it doesn't seem like that's anything that's likely to happen right away. So continued growth would certainly take the town, perhaps the county, to that program, but I think that's some years away still. That's my guess. There's a lot of good work that's going on. Michelle Edwards is on. She, of course, led the local governments to contribute to WIP3 planning. Local governments themselves have comprehensive plans and natural resource management plans. And I'm trying to familiarize myself with that and look for opportunities to reinforce and complement those type of plans. So having the local players that know that stuff best participate is really valuable and important. And sure thank Michelle and the Regional Commission for their interest to participate. As well as the NGOs, Friends of Rappahannock, PEC, have done a lot and have big plans to do more work in this area, and want to, again, dovetail well with them. Okay, continue. So that's pretty much it, and this is the slide that shows the specific dates and times for those virtual public meetings. I kind of have them in the wrong order. The public meeting at the bottom is the one that happens first, the evening of Wednesday, October 28th. The next morning, then the first of what would probably be 2 or 3 work group meetings. The others, I would hope, would conclude by January or so, January or February. To be able to move quickly. So that's what I had. There's a few slides that follow, and if people had questions about the land area or something, the slides that follow are just full-size maps. So if you want to look later on your screen, look at those maps at the end. It's just a little easier to see where things are.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Questions for Dave?
Dave, this is Brian. In working with Michelle on the Upper Rappahannock Watershed Plan, we're going to gain access to a 2018 land cover data set from the Chesapeake Bay program, which it looked like some of your maps were using the 2016 Virginia land cover data set.
Yeah, that's what we've used.
Yeah. So I'm sure Michelle or I would be able to provide that to you as soon as it's available to us, assuming contractual arrangements allow for that. And I know in that or in the scope of work that Michelle's laid out for FOR, we're going to be doing a lot of aerial assessment and ground truthing of existing DMPs to determine where other DMPs are required. And I'm sure if any of that work is going to be taking place in Mountain Run, Money Run, or the Lower Hazel, that we'd want to touch base to make sure we're not duplicating efforts.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Brian.
Dave, this is Michelle. Have you sent out a meeting announcement for these yet? Because I had checked, I hadn't received it.
No, I will get that out today.
Okay.
DQ has had kind of a complicated process to get final approval, and just got that. Well, I got the approval late last week, and then just made the arrangements for the virtual meeting software reservations yesterday. So I will get that out today.
Okay, sure. Because I don't know who is on your contact list, but I'm happy to send it out to the land use committee distribution list or anything else you would like us to send it to.
Yeah, I will send it out to the list of 25 or so folks from the area that I have in my stakeholder listing. And in my message, I'm going to ask people to please share that with whatever listings that they believe would reach people that may have interest in either just participating in the public meeting for general awareness, but especially to help reach the folks that might want to directly contribute to plan development.
Yeah, that sounds good. And Brian and I are going to plan a call with the Chesapeake Conservancy over the next month and try to get a better sense of their timeline for getting things like the new land cover data set and the stream data sets for our region for our NIFWIF grant. So at that point, we can give you a better estimation of where they are with those various data sets. Because they're going to try to get us in sooner rather than later so it works with the whole grant timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Been really helpful.
Other questions, comments for Dave? Okay.
Dave, are you under a good impression that EPA is in support of this new methodology for IP development?
Yeah, we had a conversation with them last year in the summer, kind of talked about it at a very conceptual level, and then had a more detailed discussion, 15-20 minutes as part of the non-point source program review this summer. And, you know, they're not going to approve a plan before they actually see it. Approving it means they have designated the areas eligible for 319 assistance, but they are very supportive and really encouraging of this approach. They see the potential that it would allow us to do more work within the state and open up more areas for 319 funding. Of course, at some point, it just becomes, you know, limited in terms of what can be done, limited by the amount of money that the state receives from EPA under 319. It's about $1.7 million a year. But you know, we have had to divert some of those monies to plan development itself, and so this will be a completely in-house effort, and there's definitely some benefits. So EPA is well aware of what our plans are, and at least at a pretty detailed conceptual level, are supportive of it. Similarly, I'll say EPA is very supportive of exploring alternatives to the, you know, kind of step-by-step process that involves preparing a TMDL and then preparing an implementation plan or watershed plan. And so they are, they're definitely also supportive in general, conceptually, of addressing the benthic impairment through this same watershed plan and not doing a TMDL first for that.
Yeah. I know you and I, Dave, have had conversations about a lower Rappahannock TMDL IP development, and I've had similar conversations with John Bateman. Do you see an opportunity to have a third party use your current methodology to develop an IP concurrently, or would a more traditional IP development by a third party be a better strategy at this point, because we don't know exactly how EPA is going to respond to the final product of your methodology?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a tough one to answer. EPA seemed very supportive of what we are proposing here. It is a concept that I'm fleshing out as I take each step along the path. So I don't really have a methodology that's fully fleshed out to hand to somebody and say, here, do this, and you'll have a plan as sound as the one that I'm going to have, because it's kind of a moving target. So with that as background, it probably would be a safer bet to do the more traditional approach. But I don't want to suggest that doing this comparative analysis approach could not produce a positive result. And the fact that the Mountain Run, Muddy Run, Lower Hazel River will likely be completed first, should provide some level of encouragement. So let you and I just talk more about that. Brian, I'm happy to share the approach that I use as I flesh it out. But like I said, it's a work in progress.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, with that, yeah, thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it very much. Going forward, you see the dates of remaining meetings for the calendar year. Michelle, would you be ready at the October 28th technical committee meeting to talk about the Upper Rap Watershed Plan, or is that still going to be too soon for you?
I'm hopeful that it will be fine. I will reach out to the Chesapeake Conservancy later today and let you know in the next couple of days.
Okay. And so we'll plan on that. Unless something goes awry, you can let me know. And then for November 18, I think Brian wants to talk to us about some studies that they've got going on. You want to tell us just a little bit about that, Brian? Your teaser.
Yeah, it's not Friends of the Rappahannock. It's several sub-programs under the Smithsonian. They have several of us on the call got to hear a series of presentations from several of their researchers about a month ago, or 2 weeks ago or so. And in that discussion, the opportunity to engage stakeholders from across the entire watershed in that opportunity to engage them and provide local needs, wants, and ideas for furthering research, data acquisition that's needed to help regional goals or local goals. And we had a conversation yesterday with some of their leadership team, and they are very interested in presenting to the larger roundtable partnership and the technical advisory committee here. And the date, I believe it's November 18th, seemed to work for them. And their research is focused specifically on the Rappahannock River to derive models that may be applicable to larger geographic regions in the future. But they're very interested in presenting to this body.
Okay, great. Okay, that takes us through our agenda. If anybody have anything else they want to add? All right, with that, I will let everybody get on to other things in their day. And Brian, as I said earlier, that email with the letter will be going out very shortly after this meeting concludes. And thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eldon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.